Have you ever lost someone so deeply woven into your life? The silence left behind feels louder than any noise. Have you ever looked around your own home and realized the people you trusted most might not see you anymore? My name is Evelyn. I'm 66 years old, and I live in a quiet neighborhood just outside Bloomington, Indiana. I've spent most of my adult life in the same brick house with a maple tree out front and a creaky back porch, where my husband Walter used to drink his morning coffee. We moved in when I was 24, just a year after we got married. Back then I thought we'd be there for a few years and move on. But 42 years later we were still there, still in love, and still laughing about the same old stories. Walter died 3 weeks ago. Heart failure. The doctor said it was quick, that he didn't feel anything. One moment he was sitting at his desk in the study, and the next he was gone. I still can't bring myself to clear out that room. His glasses are still folded on top of the crossword puzzle from that morning. I walk past the door and wait to hear him cough or ask for tea like he always did around 4:30 in the afternoon. It hasn't happened, and every time it doesn't, my heart breaks a little more. The funeral was held on a rainy Saturday. It suited the mood. I wore navy blue because Walter always said black was too harsh. Jason came with his wife Claire, and I was grateful. I thought maybe they'd stay a few days. The house felt too quiet, too big. I needed the noise, the company, anything to fill the silence. The first night we ate leftover casserole from the neighbors, and Claire mentioned how the kitchen needed remodeling. I didn't think much of it at the time. By the third day, I noticed Claire rearranging the living room. She took down the photo of Walter and me on our 30th anniversary and replaced it with a piece of abstract art from her car. She said it made the space look more modern. I smiled and said nothing. Grief makes you soft in places you never knew existed. I thought she was just trying to help, trying to freshen up the place. I didn't want to be unkind. On the 5th morning, I walked into the kitchen to find Claire scrubbing the pantry shelves. She didn't look up. Jason was standing beside her with his arms crossed. He didn't look angry, just uncomfortable, like a boy who knows something bad is about to be said, but doesn't know how to stop it. Claire turned and said very calmly, like she was reading a grocery list, that it was time I made arrangements. She said I'd had enough time to grieve, that maybe it was best I found a smaller place, somewhere easier to manage. I thought I'd misheard her. I actually asked her to repeat it. She did. She said it again slower, with no apology in her voice. She told me to grieve, pack my bags, and never come back. Just like that. Like I was a guest who'd overstayed her welcome. I looked at Jason, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. He looked down at the floor and said nothing. I couldn't speak. My lips moved, but nothing came out. My heart was already broken from losing Walter, and now it felt like my son had quietly placed a second crack in the center. I didn't scream. I didn't cry, not then. I just walked out of the kitchen and sat on the front porch. The maple tree rustled above me, and for a moment I thought I heard Walter's voice in the leaves. But it was just wind. Just wind. This house has seen every version of me. I walked through its front door as a young bride with dreams and mismatched furniture. Over the years, Walter and I filled it with warmth. Birthday balloons taped to doorways, the smell of roast chicken on Sundays, and stacks of school books on the dining room table. I raised Jason in this house. I remember the way he used to crawl under the kitchen table during thunderstorms, clutching his little stuffed dinosaur and waiting for it to pass. Every room holds a memory like that, so sharp and vivid it could still breathe. The kitchen was always my favorite. The cabinets are old oak-stained dark from years of hands pulling them open and closed. I cooked every meal in there even when we didn't have much. Jason hated spinach, so I used to hide it under cheese. Walter loved meatloaf, but only if I used saltines instead of breadcrumbs. The floor still squeaks near the fridge, a sound I always meant to fix, but never did. That squeak reminds me we were real people living a real life. Not a magazine spread. Not a show home. There's a small crack along the living room wall. Jason once tripped chasing the dog and hit the wall so hard it split the plaster. We never fixed it. We joked that it gave the house character. Even now, when the light hits it just right, I can still see that line running down the paint, a scar like the one on my left wrist from burning it on a tray of cookies that same day. All of it, these small imperfections, felt like family to me. Nothing in this house was ever perfect. But it was ours. When Claire moved in, things began to shift. Not all at once. Little things. She replaced the couch cushions with modern prints and boxed up the lace curtains in favor of blinds. She swapped the welcome mat for one that said something in French. At first, I thought she was nesting, making the space feel hers. I wanted to be kind. I told myself it was just her way of coping with Walter's passing with all the change. But every little swap out felt like a gentle nudge, a quiet way of saying, "You're no longer needed here." Then she started suggesting bigger things. She mentioned how the backyard could be cleared out to build a deck. She said the guest room could be turned into a home office. One morning while pouring herself a cup of coffee, she glanced at me and said the house might be a bit much for someone my age. She smiled when she said it, like it was a helpful suggestion, like I hadn't spent 4 decades cleaning every inch of this house. I smiled back, but something cold settled in my chest. A feeling I couldn't name yet, but I knew it wasn't good. Something had started to shift, and for the first time, I wasn't sure I'd be allowed to stay in the home I built. It started showing in her body language first. Claire began walking through the house like it belonged to her, her heels clacking confidently across the tile, her voice echoing just a little louder than necessary. She moved things around without asking, rearranged the spice rack, replaced the bathroom towels with ones in a color I hated, and once I even caught her on a call giving someone directions to her home. Not our home. Her home. I laughed it off at first, but something in me began to tighten each time she said it. Jason didn't say much. He would shrug when I asked about the furniture she gave away or say she just had a vision for the place. He sat behind his laptop in the den, like a ghost, letting decisions happen around him. I wanted to ask him if he remembered the years I worked overtime to help pay the mortgage or how Walter and I had picked out every piece of wood in the kitchen together. But I didn't. I didn't want to sound like I was clinging to something already slipping from my hands. One afternoon, Claire came into the living room while I was dusting the shelf with our wedding photo. She looked at it, then at me, and said it might be time I started thinking long-term about where I wanted to be. Her words were smooth like butter on a cold plate. I asked her what she meant. She sat down on the couch, crossed her legs, and told me matter-of-factly that Jason had checked the paperwork, and my name wasn't on the deed. She said it slowly, like she was trying to be polite, but I heard the blade underneath. I stood there, holding the dust rag, blinking at her. I didn't know what to say. I felt like the air had gone out of the room. I asked her what she meant again, and this time she didn't smile. She just said that legally the house was in Jason's name, and technically I was just living there. Just living there. As if the 4 decades I spent mopping floors and folding laundry under this roof didn't count. As if I had wandered in and squatted in someone else's memory. Jason walked in at that moment, holding a cup of coffee. He heard her words. He didn't argue. He didn't correct her. He just stood there and sipped his drink, eyes on the window like he was waiting for the conversation to end. I felt a crack inside me, not loud, but deep. I nodded, said I needed to lie down, and went to my room. But I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wedding quilt Walter's mother made for us, wondering when I became a guest in my own life. And for the first time, I started to wonder if Claire had planned this all along. Walter used to say it all the time. Know where your money is? He'd say it when we paid bills, when we sat at the kitchen table during tax season, or when he came home from the bank with another manila envelope full of statements. I always nodded, but I never looked too closely. He was the one who handled our finances. I trusted him. We had routines, and his calm voice made it feel like everything was always under control. But now he was gone, and the calm had gone with him. I couldn't stop thinking about Claire's words about the deed and who owned what. That afternoon, I walked out to the garage. The air smelled like dust and motor oil. Walter kept a fireproof box on a shelf above his workbench. I had seen him open it once or twice over the years. I brought it into the house and set it on the kitchen table, the same one where we used to sort coupons and balance checkbooks. The lock clicked open with the old key I found in his desk. Inside there were folders, some yellowed at the edges, others newer. At first it was just old utility bills and receipts. Then buried beneath a folder marked insurance, I found a small brass key taped to the inside of the lid. I didn't know what it opened, but something about it made my fingers tingle. I walked to the hall closet where Walter kept an old metal file cabinet. The second drawer had always been locked. When I turned the key, it clicked with a sound that sent a chill through me. Inside was a stack of envelopes and a folder labeled Evelyn. Trust. I sat on the floor, the cool air from the vent brushing my cheek, and began to read. There were financial statements from a brokerage firm I didn't recognize, a document from a law office in Indianapolis, and then tucked into a manila envelope was a printed email. It was from Walter to a man named Rick, dated almost 2 years ago. He'd written that he wanted to move all personal assets into a revocable trust in my name. My name, not Jason's, not shared, just mine. My heart was pounding. I read the papers again and again. Every line seemed to confirm what I barely dared to hope. Walter had made sure I was protected. Quietly, privately, without drama or fanfare. The kitchen felt warmer somehow. I looked around at the cabinets, the fridge, the window above the sink. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like I was being erased. I felt like Walter had left me a map, and I had just found the first marker. I sat there for another hour going through every page. Each document was a breadcrumb, a quiet message from a man who knew me, loved me, and had planned for a world where he wouldn't be able to stand beside me. As the sun slipped lower through the kitchen window, I folded the papers back into the folder and held them close to my chest. I didn't know everything yet, but I knew enough to start asking better questions, and I wasn't going to be dismissed so easily again. The next morning, I made an appointment with the attorney listed in the trust papers. His office was downtown in a red brick building with ivy crawling up the side. His name was Richard Avery, a quiet man in his 60s who greeted me like he already knew what I had come for. I handed him the documents, and he looked through them slowly, nodding here and there, scribbling a note, flipping a page. I sat across from him, gripping my purse like it was the only thing anchoring me to the floor. When he finished, he leaned back and spoke gently. He confirmed that Walter had transferred full ownership of the family trust to me. The house, the savings accounts, even the shares in Harrison Build Co., everything had been placed under my name more than a year ago. I blinked, not understanding right away. He repeated it, even showed me a highlighted section of the trust document. It was all mine. No one else had legal claim to any of it. I sat there in silence, the weight of that information sinking into my bones. I owned the company that Jason thought would pass to him. I owned the house that Claire had tried to edge me out of. I owned the future they thought they could shape without me. I wasn't just some widow clinging to memories. I was the trustee of everything Walter had built. And he had trusted me, not them, to carry it forward. It took me a moment to find my voice. I asked the attorney why Walter hadn't told me. He gave a small smile and said some men do their best thinking in silence. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I remembered all the times Walter had said he'd taken care of everything, that I didn't need to worry. He had meant it. Not just in words, but in paperwork signatures, notarized intent. Every detail had been seen to. He hadn't left me behind. He had lifted me up. I walked out of that office with a folder in my hands and a storm in my chest. Not anger. Not revenge. Something steadier. I felt my spine straighten. My jaw set. I could see everything clearly now. Claire had been playing a game she thought she'd already won. Jason had stepped aside without asking any questions. But Walter had never underestimated me. He knew I'd find the truth when I needed it most. Back home, I made copies of the documents and placed the originals in a safe place. I stood in the kitchen and looked around, not with nostalgia, but with quiet authority. I wasn't going to argue anymore about who this house belonged to. I didn't need their permission. I had every right to be there, more than anyone else in that building. For the first time in weeks, I slept through the night without waking in tears. I didn't just feel like someone's mother or someone's wife. I felt like someone who mattered, and I was ready to act like it. I asked them both to sit down that Sunday afternoon. The living room felt colder than usual, though the sun poured in through the window just like always. Jason looked confused, rubbing the back of his neck like he did when he was nervous. Claire crossed her arms and glanced at her phone. I waited until they were quiet. Then I spoke. I told them I had been going through Walter's papers, that I'd met with an attorney. Claire rolled her eyes at that, but I didn't let it shake me. I looked at Jason and said his father had placed everything into a trust. The house, the company, the accounts. All of it was in my name. Jason blinked like he hadn't heard me right. Claire sat up straighter. She started to interrupt, but I raised my hand. Calmly. No yelling. No drama. I told her the trust was filed legally, that Walter had set it up over a year ago, that he made me the sole trustee and nothing had changed since then. Claire's face went pale, but her mouth stayed tight. Jason just stared at the rug like he was trying to find a crack in it to fall through. I took the folder from the side table and handed it to Jason. He opened it slowly. He read the top page, then the next. His face didn't move, but his shoulders slumped just enough to say everything. Claire leaned over to look, her eyes scanning for a loophole. She said something about needing to talk to their own lawyer. I told her she was free to do that. But nothing would change what Walter had done. Nothing would change what I now knew. I let the silence hang for a moment. Then I said it as evenly as I could. Jason, you never asked. Claire, you assumed. You both made choices without knowing the truth. And now you have to live with the consequences. Neither of them spoke. The ticking clock over the mantel was the only sound. For once, Claire had no comeback. Jason looked like a man who had lost something he never knew he needed to fight for. I stood up, not angry, just clear. I told them the conversation was over. I had said what I came to say. The rest was up to them. As I walked out of the room, I felt something shift in the air behind me. It wasn't just power. It was peace. The kind that comes when you finally know your worth, and you're not afraid to stand on it. I stood by the window watching the leaves shift in the breeze and told them I wasn't going to make them leave right away. I said they had 30 days to make other arrangements. Claire looked up at me like she couldn't believe what she'd heard. Jason didn't say anything. He just nodded slowly, as if the weight of reality was finally settling onto his shoulders. Claire broke first. Her voice cracked as she asked if I knew how much debt they were in. She said the business had been bleeding for months, that they had maxed out credit cards pulled from savings, even missed a mortgage payment on their old place before moving in here. She looked right at me, not with pride, but with exhaustion. She said they thought if they could get this house, they'd finally be able to breathe. That they didn't know Walter had already made other plans. I didn't know what to say. I had expected pride, arrogance, not fear, not desperation. My anger didn't disappear, but it shifted. I saw Claire not as the villain I'd built in my mind, but as a woman backed into a corner making bad choices with shaky hands. I still didn't like what she did. I still couldn't excuse it. But I understood something new. She was trying to survive just like I was. Jason sat down on the couch and stared at the floor. He didn't defend her. He didn't defend himself. He just said he was sorry. I told them both I didn't need apologies. I needed honesty. I told them I didn't know what would happen after 30 days, but for now they had that time, and they should use it well. The room went quiet again. It was a different kind of silence than before. Not heavy, not hostile, just honest. The air felt lighter but not clean, like something had cracked open and now we all had to sit in what came spilling out. I turned away from them and walked toward the hallway, unsure if they were watching me or not. But I felt something shift in me too. I still hurt, but I no longer felt powerless. I still felt betrayed. But now I could see the whole picture, not just the part that painted me as the victim. I didn't forgive them. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I could understand how people make ugly choices when they feel like the ground beneath them is about to disappear. And somehow that understanding made the weight in my chest a little easier to carry. Spring arrived a few weeks after that long conversation. The air started to soften and the backyard, once brittle and brown, began to hint at green again. I pulled on my gloves and went out early one morning just after 8:15 a.m., with a flat of marigolds and a trowel. Walter always liked marigolds, said they were cheerful but strong. I planted them along the fence line, humming a tune I couldn't quite name, letting the sun warm the back of my neck. Every shovelful of dirt felt like part of a ritual. I wasn't burying the past, not exactly. I was making room for something new. For years I'd cared for everyone but myself. I'd made meals, paid bills, stayed quiet, stayed pleasant. I don't regret that. It was love. It was survival. But now I was learning something different. How to protect myself without losing my softness. How to set boundaries without closing my heart. The house feels different now. Not because anything has changed in how it looks, but in how I stand inside it. I walk into each room like I belong there. Because I do. I drink coffee on the front porch again. I sleep with the door open and the hallway light off. I let myself take up space. I don't apologize when I ask someone to knock before entering. I don't shrink when someone questions my decisions. That's not revenge. That's healing. Claire and Jason moved out before the month was over. No shouting. No final blowout. Just boxes in a U-Haul and a quiet goodbye. Jason hugged me. Claire said thank you, but she didn't look me in the eyes. I didn't chase either of them for more. I simply wished them well and watched the truck pull away. That chapter closed on its own. There are still hard days. I still wake up sometimes thinking Walter is in the next room. I still find his flannel shirts in the laundry and forget for half a second that he won't be wearing them again. Grief doesn't vanish. It folds itself into the corners of your life. But so does strength. It shows up when you least expect it, like a beam of sunlight through kitchen curtains or a neighbor's wave from across the yard. I've taken over the bookkeeping for Harrison Build Co. I don't run the job sites, but I've hired good people who do. I check the books every morning. I know where every dollar is. Walter would be proud. Not just because I'm handling it, but because I finally believe I'm capable of it. I'm not waiting for someone to tell me what I'm worth anymore. I already know. Sometimes I sit on the back step with a cup of tea and just listen to the wind. There's peace in it now. Not silence, not loneliness. Just peace. The kind you earn after fighting your way through confusion, pain, and doubt. The kind you carry quietly without needing anyone else to notice. So that's my story. One of heartbreak discovery and finally healing. If someone had told me months ago that I'd be here feeling steady and sure, I wouldn't have believed them. But here I am. Not bitter. Not broken. Just better. Stronger. Wiser. And I'll ask you something now. If it were you, if the people you loved tried to erase you, would you have stayed quiet? Or would you have found your voice even if it shook? Because I'll tell you this. Justice isn't revenge. It's knowing your worth. And standing tall in it no matter who tries to sit you down. If this story touched something in you, share it with someone who might need to hear it. You never know who's quietly waiting for permission to stand up for themselves. And if you've been through something like this, tell me. I'm listening. We all need to be reminded that our voice matters.